All right. It's recording.
Great. Wonderful. Well, I assume he's going to jump on, at least Nate will, and Jim, so we'll give them another moment. Maybe we have the mayor with us also? Mayor Sherman?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
All right. Okay, great. Well, we'll pick up where we left off as we were finishing some discussion about the right to know. Josh talked on some of the logistics of that, saying, that the SBD where he was referencing in Syracuse, wondering about how to hand out business cards when you're showing up to some sort of, call. And how does that work logistically and practically? So I'm sure that's a concern. And then, we talked about how would rank and file respond to having to do that. So, and Nate, just so you're aware as well, and that Jim's not on yet, but Josh is recording this. So he's able to do that from his link. So that's great. Should we move on to SROs, or do we want to, anybody else have anything you want to add to the right to know? So I've had some experience myself with the school resource officers. I had, as a teacher, I had 1 year where we had an SRO in a building as a new program, and there was regular handcuffing and pushing to the ground. And this is a middle school, not in an inner city situation. So we had to work through as a faculty member ways to be sure that everyone was aware of process. And I've certainly also been in situations where the SROs have been a huge resource, and they've come into my room and co-taught lessons with me. And so I've seen kind of both ends to it, but and I was eager to have Chris Major on today. I know he spent years as SRO at the high school. So I guess the questions, should law enforcement have a presence in schools? That's an ongoing kind of point of discussion, I think, with a lot of schools. And are the ones that are deployed in the schools serving the needs of the students in the schools? How are they serving the needs of the students? So I don't know if anyone here can elaborate on that, or if Jim and Lieutenant Wellauer can elaborate.
Eileen, if I may, I was an SRO for 9.5 years.
Okay.
I was at the high school. I did the elementary school. I apologize for coming in a little late. I was trying to set everything up and wait for the other one to download. So
Jim, really, you're better than having Chris Major on. So I'll just say that. I'm sorry.
I hear that a lot. No.
I apologize.
So our role was much more than a police officer in a school. And that's to me, that's what I took out of it. I mean, our first year in the school, we made a lot of arrests, and that was back in 2009. And we realized that wasn't a way to go. That wasn't our role there. That's not what we wanted to do. So we started, I think my very first year, we arrested 48 people in that year. And by the time I left, we got it down into the teens because we realized that wasn't our goal. And it was to educate the students on how to be better individuals. So we brought them in more and talked to them. If we did make an arrest because the school wanted it, basically for weapons or drugs, we had no choice in that scenario. But we realized our role was much more than being a cop up in the school. You were at every event, you were at all dances, football games, any sporting event. We walked the halls, we were in the cafeteria every day. So kids got to see us, and I know it really worked. For me personally, I know it worked because when I was outside that building and I was on the street, and when individuals came out to me and treated me differently than they did other officers, I knew it was working because in the school they felt they had to, because I was there. I was that adult, I was that role model. But when they were outside, they treated me the same, and I treated them the same, and they realized that we could coexist outside the building too. So for me, I love being an SRO. It was more of a mentor. We got into classes and taught. We did a lot more than just we're a police officer up in the building.
So when I started at the sheriff's office, we had SROs at Southern Cayuga, Weedsport, Port Byron and Cato. Most of them were all grant funded at the time, and that whittled down as the grants ended. We picked up BOCES, which is not your typical SRO position. BOCES is definitely a hybrid because of the clients they serve. We spend a lot of time in the areas where they have a lot of children with troubled backgrounds and medical and emotional needs. So we spend a lot of time doing things outside the norm of an SRO and even a police officer. But it's a critical role. And then we're looking right now at putting a part-time SRO back in Port Byron at their request. And I've had a lot of feedback over the years, and I can tell you, I can't think of one negative feedback that I've received over the years. In my opinion, it's a very positive environment for our officers to be working in. They feel like they're making a difference. And I think from the feedback, staff and students take a lot from it. And to echo Lieutenant Slayton, I've been at events with Lieutenant Slayton, and I've seen this with the SROs, the sheriff's office, where adults will come up and there's a completely different approach and respect because they had them in school. They knew them in school. They knew them personally, not just as the guy with the flashing lights pulling up behind him, but as an individual. And so it builds those relationships that I think has a significant effect over decades following school. So that's my perspective. But like I say, it's interesting to hear what the community says, what their perspective is. That's what we're here to learn.
Mhm.
If I could weigh in, just I think a couple factors. I think it's critical that we have law enforcement in our schools. I've got 6 boys, 5 of them currently in Auburn School District, and I have a cousin who has dedicated his life to school security. We live in a generation of active shooter situations, and sadly, that's our reality. And so I think it's critical that we have a law enforcement presence. I think the other reality is, I grew up in a home and in I wouldn't say neighborhood, but in an area where law enforcement was respected and appreciated and was considered to be an ally, a friend, somebody that we could look to and trust. And I've heard many, many accounts where that's not the case. There's a lot of communities where that's not the case. And so I think when we have law enforcement that can be around children and build those relationships and build those bridges, I think that goes a long way. And that may be the only opportunity for law enforcement to do that in some cases. So I think when we have the right policies and procedures in place, when we have the right SROs in place, it's a win-win. And I love seeing in the the directives that, they're not there as disciplinarians. They're not there dealing with the discipline issues of the school. And that puts them in a bad light. What Lieutenant Slayton said about, bringing the arrests down from 40 something to the teens, that I think that's critical, that, they're not there to make arrests. They're there to have an impact on lives and make sure the kids are safe.
Anyone have anything else to add about SROs? And
Just if I may, just before you go on another topic, just with the classes that we got into, and that's one of the things that we touched base on when Josh was talking about getting comfortable with officers. We did classes on being stopped by the police, what the police are looking for, what to do. Same thing, same conversations I have with my kids at home. Just if they can see your hands and your hands are on the wheel, turn the light on. We got into the cases if somebody did get stopped, why you see so many officers pull up initially on a scene, maybe in the middle of the night. And we wanted the feedback from them and explain to them why we do what we do, because they are young kids and they might not have these conversations. So we got into topics like that and search and seizure and told them what their rights were. So we didn't hide anything from them.
And of course, humanizing you guys in that role that's huge. That's, I know my kids dealt with the SROs in Auburn before they moved to a different district, and, they were just familiar with them, and they were somebody's dad or friend of mom's, or, and that humanized the whole thing. So it makes them less afraid or, less anxious, understanding that you're a partner as the teachers are, and keeping you safe and healthy and in a nice community that is safe. Well, if you want to, we'll move on to the next, which is the hiring process for both. So what is the process and how is recruitment take place and what's involved? I'm curious to find out, how you develop a diverse leadership team in your departments, and then maybe evaluations. But what's the hiring process like for each department?
So as everybody probably realizes, our hiring process has to start with civil service, which is a civil service exam. We've done quite a bit of work the last couple of years. Sheriff has done quite a bit of work the last couple of years to try and really promote that for two reasons. One, because we certainly would like to see more diversity, and two, because all across the board, recruitment numbers are way down. But that all starts with a civil service exam, and then that ends up at a physical agility test. And then depending on the ranking, we end up with a list from civil service, a certified list from civil service. And those are the folks that we have to begin doing our background on, and ultimately, to hire from. So the recruitment part we've really been promoting, and we would also encourage our community partners to assist us with that, as they have. And then ultimately, like I say, it's that list, it's a civil service list. So internally, anybody that's got the right number of years on can take our internal promotions from the ranks of supervisor all the way up through administration. And so, depending on who takes those tests, and depending on, again, what civil service list we get back, we have to hire from the top 3 on that list. So those things are all relatively governed by New York state law, I would say.
So to echo Lieutenant Wellauer, ours is the same process. It's civil service. So they do the initial testing and agility and stuff. We outlined this in the form that we had at City Hall. It takes 19 steps to go from signing up to the test to getting hired. And not a lot of people realize it's that lengthy of a process between taking the test, passing agility, background, passing a background, then you have a polygraph, you have a medical, you have a psychological, you have to go to the academy. We lose people in the academy all the time. So out of 189 individuals that were eligible on our last list, we hired 13, and 9 of those have made it out of the academy. So out of 189, this last go around, we got 9 people. So it's a long, lengthy process that we do, and that falls out of my office. And we do kind of the same thing. We have senior officers do the backgrounds. It's detectives and command staff to do all the backgrounds for everybody. It's not as simple as just going to a neighborhood and say, hey, do you want a job? Train them for a little bit. And it takes, the academy is 27 weeks long, and then they're on an 18-week field training program. So it's almost a year before we get somebody back from the start of when they go to the academy, let alone the first year it takes about to get them up to speed to get to the academy. So it's quite a lengthy process.
And there are certain kind of immovable objects in this process, right, Jim? That there's, as you've discussed, there's the rigors of the academy. There's the test itself. There's FTO after they're on the ground. I recall that the chief had, and I bet you were in on this, had some outreach to attack basically the one area in the process where there is some wiggle room, and that is getting people trained up for just taking the test. I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about that, and maybe you can share what the PD has done to bring the message that, hey, you gotta take a civil service test first to become a police officer. Bring that message out to parts of the community that may not have known that.
Yeah, in conjunction with civil service and the sheriff's department, we do a lot with the sheriff's department. They're great. So we end up hosting a bunch of different meetings, and every year we learn more and more. We bring the applications to this site that we go to. We did one at BTW. We do them at different sites downtown in different areas, and we bring the application there, explain the process to them, let them fill the application out. We'll take it with us. Then one other thing we worked with the sheriff's department was, because we were losing so many people in the agility portion, that we decided to give like a pre-agility, see where you stand. So we threw out a couple different dates. And once again, we had, I'll use last year, 189 people on 2 dates. The first date I had 13 people show up, and the second date I had 7 show up that did the agility. And we had a couple people fail it, which doesn't go against them as far as when they pass the test. But then they came back at the time of the agility and were able to pass the agility based on they knew what they had to work on. So we're learning every year, and we plan on doing that again this year. Once we get the list back, have a prep agility, say, hey, here's your weakness. You can get through this, and encourage people and help them pass the agility test.
I think it's been noticeable, the outreach, and I think all those things are great. I think, building on those outreaches and recruitment's going to be a huge challenge moving forward, especially given the year that we're in and the challenges associated with academies right now. But kind of tying in a couple of the previous items, right? Outreach programs, school SROs, and now with this, the hiring process. I wonder about, you think about a lot of kids, people who become police officers. That's what they wanted to do when they were a kid. They wanted to be a police officer. And so I wonder about, I know we don't have active Explorer programs with our sheriff's office or our PD, but I wonder about, kind of Explorer clubs in the schools, where they're learning about this, they're learning about what it would be like to be an officer, and even beginning to instill that in them, and even prepare them at a young age of what they're going to need to prepare for. And that way they're kind of ahead of the game, because at that point, when you're doing the outreach to 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and sometimes older, for some, they're, it's already out of reach. It's beyond their hopes. And so I wonder about meeting them at a younger age with school programs. I don't know if it's kind of a longer play, a slower play, but I wonder if it's been done elsewhere, and if we'd see some fruit from it.
BOCES has a program that we'd like to use as a feeder program, and the criminal justice program at BOCES. The issue there we run into is to take the civil service exam, you have to be 19 and a half years of age to take it, 20 to go into the academy, and then get out. There's a little gap. We're finding that the kids coming in the BOCES are like 17, 18 years old. And then we lose them in that year and a half when they're, because of civil service law, they can't take it until they're 19 and a half.
Jimmy, are they paid while they're in training?
Yes. Yep. While they're at the academy, they're paid.
Right, that's what I meant.
Yes.
Is there any way to cut out some of those 19 steps? I mean, I just know how difficult it is to hire in the private sector and how long that takes, let alone the bureaucracy of civil service and 19 steps.
But some of that is, I mean, the agility test that they take has to, it's at the 40 percentile they have to pass. They go into the academy, and that's the standard they start at with the academy, and they got to be at 75% by the time they graduate. So each academy is different. Like we had sent somebody to the Broom Academy, this last academy, and one of our individuals got tested the first day. He passed the 40 percentile at our place, went the first day and couldn't pass. And that was the last day of the academy for him. Day one was his last day. They just sent him home. So each academy is different. Now, Syracuse, that same individual may have worked with him. And by the time he was done, I have every belief that he would have made it. But we have to go by what the standards are at the academy. So taking some steps out are really not going to work because of the polygraph you have to go through, the medical. We want to make sure that they're healthy and they can get through an academy.
So why do they vary at academies though? I mean, like if I thought I was going to struggle and I know that Syracuse would work with me, I'd be more inclined to apply at Syracuse than Auburn.
Typically we used Syracuse Academy, and then Syracuse Academy wasn't having a class. So we went to Broom because they were the only ones. We couldn't get anybody in the Finger Lakes, and that's where the sheriff's department sent some people. So Finger Lakes was full. So we used Broom for the first time. And now I have 4 individuals up in Mohawk, up in Utica. So we're finding that Syracuse isn't hiring now. So they're not having an academy. We're kind of fillers for them. They put all their people in and they allow 2, 3, 4 of ours to go in with them.
And I think, you know, what we find in the, clearly I live in the civil service realm. Folks don't know how and where and what to do to take a test or to get involved with that. Is there any sort of outreach that either department does to, you know, besides announce the test? Is, you know, I know you're talking about, you mentioned it at council, you know, giving them tips about the test, but in terms of outreach, you know, do you just, is it an advertisement in the newspaper? Is it, you know, how does that work?
We've done events like National Night Out. We've done events, community events where we've shown up and tried to promote when we had a test coming up. One of them that comes to my mind is up to the college. They have some event time up there, not this year, but previous years. So we've promoted it that way. We promote it on our social media, try and promote it with some of our partnerships that we've developed over the years to, you know, reach as many people as possible. Like a marketing campaign, I guess you'd say. We did have quite a bit of success in people signing up. We had several hundred sign up to this last round. Just a slight bit more than the city. Not sure why, but we did. Just throw that out there. But you know, we have the same thing. By the time we get around to hiring folks on the list, as we move down the list, time's gone by. People have taken other jobs, lost interest, and then we lose people through attrition. We still have a pretty decent list right now, and we did pretty well this last time. So as we move into hiring in the coming year, I think we've got a real good group of folks. But again, we're only hiring from those people that ended on the list, and that's the pool that civil service gives us. And as far as the academies, some are easier than others, that's for sure. What we find is we try and grab whichever academy we can that's coming up. And if Syracuse or Onondaga isn't having an academy for 6 months, we may look to another academy like Finger Lakes. We do use them a lot. So.
Yeah, some of the different places that I went is I went, sorry, I went, we parked downtown, just put up our sign, sat there. We sat out front of Dunkin' Donuts. We went wherever we could go. This was a tough year. The previous year I got into colleges. I went as far as, I got into Brockport. I got into Oswego. We ventured out a little bit, but this year without having any career days, you know, they have the career day at the high school, they have the career day at the colleges. Any place that we could set up shop, we did.
Did you have any luck? I know you had the event at Booker T, and I think that was a really good idea. Did it work or no?
Yeah, this last time we had 9 people show up at Booker T, Washington. We're waiting for the results to come back. They should be back about the 2nd or 3rd week of December.
So you had 9 people take the exam, like follow through and take the exam?
Yes. Yep.
That's great.
And some of them were former students of mine. So I kept reaching out to them to make sure they were going.
Yeah.
I went down during the daytime to Booker T, Washington, and met with them, and any help you need, whatever you need, there are steps you have to take. It's unfortunate, but there is a process.
Yeah, no, that's great, especially with the follow-up. I think that's something that's exactly what we need more of, is the reaching out to more diverse communities and getting those kids started taking the tests. And if nothing else, it familiarizes them with the civil service system if they ever want to apply for a different job, even if they don't, you know, if they're not successful. So I appreciate that you did that.
Yeah, Jim, you really buried the lead there. That's a smashing success, really. You know, I may have been recalling a year previous where there wasn't a tremendous amount of follow through, but 9 people taking a test from one event. I mean, that's huge, and I hope, my guess is internally that's seen as a victory, and it sure seems like a great result, and hopefully that will, you know, encourage the PD to keep that sort of outreach up. I'm pretty sure that it will.
Yeah, thank you. I try to learn every year. If there's something else that will work for us or work for the community, I'm willing to go whenever, wherever. We just want to get as many people the opportunity to take the test and understand the process.
So when we talk about the next or the last bullet underneath our community relations, we talk about collaboration. What was that event at Booker T that led you to advertise there or talk to folks there?
Well, the previous year we worked with civil service and the sheriff's department, and we got out and we said, we're having a test. We went down, we got a few people, not many. And then we realized this year we had to do more. So we reached out to individuals ourselves. We worked with Denise Farrington at VTW. We worked with Jack Hardy at Civil Service and Jeff Whiting, and really promoted it. It was on our, Facebook page. It was on the city website. Any advertisement that we could use to put it out, we did. And with the efforts of a few people, we got quite a few people there that night. Some individuals that had never taken it before and didn't understand the process. So we know that worked, and we hope to grow from there.
Yeah, that's a great kind of collaborative process with that venue. And do you guys do, I don't know if the sheriff and the city do work together on that effort to recruit, or no, do you guys work pretty much in silos on that, or what? How's it work?
We have worked together significantly. I can't say we've shared every single event, but we've worked together significantly over the, in the city, I think was our test is still good. So we didn't have a test this year, but I think the city did. So there was a kind of a gap year where they were recruiting and we weren't, just because there was no upcoming test.
So in terms of collaboration and, some sort of collaboration in whatever programs you guys have used, or I guess steps you've taken to be more inclusive of all segments of the population, can you talk about kind of your level of collaboration with the residents? And, I know you folks are heavy with the school districts, but I guess I'm looking at to reach a more diverse, inclusive, collaborative relationship. How do you folks reach out? Who do you work with?
Yeah, we'll work with the Housing Authority. We work with Chapel House. We work with Nick's Ride, Helio Health. So Nick's Ride and Helio Health we work with for addictions. Right now in our policy, what we do is if we have somebody or a family member is looking to get somebody help, and instead of incarceration, it might not work for them. We try to get Nick's Ride or another addiction agency involved and maybe help them on that path. Or if a family at that particular time would like to get a family member help, we connect them with them. We give them the cards. We carry Nick's Rides cards, Helio House numbers, the Chapel House for the homeless. If we get somebody that's homeless, we work with them to try to place somebody in the Chapel House for a place to stay. The rescue mission, we do different events with them. We try to give back and work with as many organizations as we can throughout the city.
How about the county?
Yeah, I mean, we work with many of the same organizations at the county level. Helio Health and Nick's Rides are the primary, like he said, Nick's Rides being first, and then Helio Health being secondary because they're Onondaga County. But we also work a lot with Cayuga County Social Services. And then they would do a lot of references to other entities or agencies outside the city. The county would work with them a lot, primarily.
I think a key collaboration we've seen this year too is with the NAACP and Social Justice Task Force. A lot of work this last year together.
I just wanted to add in this respect that the collaboration I think has been really good in the upper ranks of my experiences, mostly with APD. But when you get down to the patrol level, and it's understandable, it's just not on their radar. So that when they're responding to calls, sometimes that involve like a member of my staff, we're kind of treated like we're a criminal as well. I've heard, why are you housing these people? Why don't you just evict these people? I'm treated like a slumlord, essentially. So when I have collaboration with APD, and I know that I can have respectful and meaningful conversations with, lieutenants, detectives on up, it can be very frustrating to then constantly encounter members of patrol who don't, it's like they're not in on that. They're not aware. So I feel like it's not pushing down to that street level officer. And I think part of it is they maybe don't know the community well. They're young, they're new, and they're probably stressed out responding to the situation they're responding to. So I don't want to minimize any of that, but I mean, wow. It can be jarring to see the difference between the two. So again, the level of collaboration and respect in the upper ranks, and then the complete lack of regard in the lower ranks. So I would say that's something that needs improvement.
And that is a work in progress, to get them to buy in. And they do get tasks going from call to call to call. So Chief Gennady used to use the term a Band-Aid effect, that they would put a Band-Aid on something, do what they could at that particular time and move on to the next call, because not defending them, but they're on the radio, they're going, I need 2 people to clear, I need 2 people to clear, I need it. So they're cutting you short. You don't feel like you're getting the service you need. But then when you reach out at a later date to us, we're willing to give you whatever. We need to push that down to patrol, give it as much time, and like staffing will help. Right now, being so short, we're still 7 people short. That we have to be able to take our time on calls and answer the calls to your satisfaction. And I know they're just being pulled in several different directions. So hopefully, if we, one thing ties to another, that recruitment in the hiring process ties to that officer being able to spend more time with you to make you feel like you're getting your value of that officer on that call, as opposed to him having to leave because dispatch is calling him to go to another call.
Right, and I don't, it's not always necessarily time though. It's not that I want them to be there longer or spend more time. It's the attitude. It's the attitude that's the problem. It's the way they're approaching the situation where, you know, and I get it to an extent, but they're getting that attitude from somewhere, right? So some, you know, I don't know how to describe it. Laurie, do you know what are?
I know what you're talking about, and it's the blatant disrespect, and it's not time, and so if we call for assistance, a lot of times, like Stephanie's saying, it's that the person we're working with, whether they're in poverty, whether it's DV, whatever, it's almost like they don't have time for that person. You know, if it's a mental health call even, well, we've been around the block 7 times with this person already. You know, they won't take their meds. What else do you want me to do? They, not only are they rude to that individual, but they're rude to our staff. And talking about the business cards, there's been many times when staff have come back to me and said, you're not going to believe just what happened, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, who was the officer? Well, I didn't get his name. You know, so then I have to call and talk to whoever's on the desk and say, you know, whatever. But I think that, and I don't see it so much with, well, I can't say those that have been on a while, but, and maybe it is that they're overworked and stressed and so forth, but I just don't think that there's the understanding or the empathy, or, you know, it's more, that's what turns people off about police officers, is that they're not available or respectful. And I'm not saying all of them, and I'm not saying in every case, but it happens a lot. And it's even our staff, my staff comes to me and they're like, you're not going to believe the way that cop just treated me. And that, when we have a collaborative relationship with the police department, and then to come into our business when we need assistance or somebody there needs assistance, and the officer is just so blatantly rude, that's not acceptable. You know, and I don't know, you know, and then taking the exam, you know, it's like, has Auburn Police Department improved? And I mean, Jim, you're my, you know, we graduated together. So, you know, you go back in time and you can see how it evolved. You know, like if you're, you know, a lot of times police officers gave somebody a ride home. And then, you know, you can see the evolution of how policing has changed. For all the money in the world, I would not want to be a police officer today, you know. But there's that personal aspect that I think is missing. I don't know.
No, and we'll find out with the generation gaps,
Mhm.
you had that, but one of the things that I wonder if would work is, have you ever come in and done like a lineup training with us? So we can introduce the staff, because we do lineup 3 times a day. And
Mhm.
I'm just thinking off the cuff here that if you came in and presented what you do. I'm sorry, Steph.
That would be really helpful, just
Yeah,
so
'cause-
that they can ask questions and I can, I can explain to them, like, I might call you about this tenant multiple times, but I'm not legally allowed to evict them.
Mhm.
Or this is the population that I in fact have to house, and if I evict them and solve my problem, you're still gonna have a problem with this person over at Chapel House or wherever else. So kind of sometimes putting that stuff in perspective is really helpful, because I do think a lot of it is education.
And we do have organizations come in when we have something like that, like when Helio was new, they came in and they would say, this is who we are and this is what we do. And this is when you can call us and this is what we can do for you. Any officer out there, if you're gonna take someone off their hand because they're feeling they're being put out, they're gonna call you every single time and say, hey, you came into our lineup and you told us you could do this. Well, I have somebody here now that needs that. Can you help me? So that may be something we can work on and get you into the different shifts and come in and do some lineup training.
Jim, I mean, I assume, like there's mental health training and stuff like that they go through, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We do that, and I think yours is a little more specific to you and your need as far as a broader perspective of what you're looking for in the mental health when you're out there. But by all means, you can contact me and that's something we can work on through this and add to our training.
Like I'm saying, like with de-escalation and stuff, and I'm going back from a previous career where, it was chronically mentally ill, 60 adults, and the police officer that was on that night that comes in and is so rude and, aggressive to the resident and everything is a fireman during the day, so where is that gap? And what is that training? Like when you're in one of the rural communities and your police force may or may not be somebody's second job. So I think that's an issue as well, of like what type of trainings and so forth, as far as like mental health and de-escalation. And
I know one thing that's emerged in both the police department and the sheriff's office are crisis intervention team training, which deals specifically with that. So you have a lot dealing with mental health services and collaboration, with different agencies in that regard. So I know that that's emerging. I don't know how developed it is for each of your offices, but I do know of specific officers in each that have been advancing that forward.
So at the sheriff's office, all members receive training in anti-bias and mental health. And also we have a CIT team that meets. And so what would happen, we would expect obviously the utmost of respect from our officers, whether it be towards staff or clients, members of the public. And certainly we address those matters if they come up. Maybe somebody's having a bad day, maybe they need a little adjustment. We certainly address those things. And, and I have bad days, right? So I have to self-check myself, and that's human nature. And so we've put into place, some of these trainings that we do annually in order to just continue to remind our folks, not to mention our mission of treating people with respect. And then we have the sheriff's office participates in the critical incident team. So we'll have people come to our attention who are repeat offenders, if you will, or have ongoing issues that the team can then sort of roundtable and determine, is there some resources? Is there a better mechanism of dealing with this so that we can solve the problem and not just continually respond to the issue at hand? And so I think that's something that we have started. I've referred a few things to the CIT and seen almost immediate results in response. So I think that is, as Josh mentioned, an up and coming way to solve or to try and better get a handle on some of these reoccurring situations.
And again, like I'm not saying everybody on the police force is rude or anything like that. And again, it goes back to, I mean, our society has changed over the years, and there's so much coming at all of us, whether we're in the human services field, law enforcement, is training offered to be reactive in a positive way to how our society has changed, I guess. And again, I mean, to say somebody was rude and disrespectful, I can get a phone call someday too that says, hey, Laurie, I was at your agency today and the staff person was rude, disrespectful. That happens. But again, then there's the training and so forth. So I guess as far as what Stephanie's saying, I can agree on that. And then it's just, how is it addressed? Or, I mean, if we're feeling that way as heads of agencies, how is somebody in the public feeling about it?
Someone who doesn't get to sit on these calls. How are they
I'm sorry, what's that, Stephanie?
Yeah, it's if you're not invited to sit on calls like this, how are you feeling? What's your outlet? I think that I don't know, I lost my train of thought. But sometimes it's like, if you get a complaint or something that an officer has been particularly rude or disrespectful, is the conversation from that person's supervisor like, just be nicer next time, like, come on, like, make this easier for us. Is it that kind of thing? Or is it, are your sergeants, I guess when you send officers to anti-bias training and things like that, are they really buying into it? Because I've heard a lot of them just tell me it's complete BS and they don't believe it. So how are they then supervising officers and getting them to buy into it? You know what I mean? Like, how can we make it so that, I don't know how you shift someone's perspective that way, but it feels like kind of the middle of the agencies doesn't necessarily believe in some of this stuff. And so when they receive a complaint or when they're asked to respond to something, I get the feeling that the conversation is probably like, come on, go along to get along, like, just show this person some more respect, please. Just instead of, trying to get them to understand that there's more behind some of these situations than just be nice to this person, right? If you're talking to Laurie Piccolo, just be nice to her, get her to shut up, and so on.
I'll take it as a two-part question. So the first is, I always offer the training. I always offer it out first to people. Say, hey, I have a de-escalation training coming up. Would you like to go? I just sent 6 people to Tompkins County for a de-escalation training. We then have an online portal that we use. It's called Police One Academy. And I roll out de-escalation training, anti-bias training, implicit bias training. We have over 13,000 hours of training that we've done this year alone on different things. So they get their training, and every training that you take on that, there's a test afterwards. So it asks you specific questions based on de-escalation techniques, anti-bias, implicit bias. There's a lot of different, so we're able to do that and still have the officers go on there. We found a way to do this through this website, and they can still go on their calls. They get a month to do it. It's an hour to 2 hour long videos. You can't click ahead. You have to go right along with it, and you have to take a test at the end. So we do that, and then we follow it up with offering different trainings to different people that are willing to go out and do this. The second part of that question is, if somebody comes in and makes a complaint, or you feel like, hey, I was treated unfairly by your officer, and you call the desk, that supervisor has to follow up on that. They take that, they listen to your complaint, they take down what it was, they punch a number for it, they generate the call, and they sit down with the individual. I mean, it could go to a a counseling memo, as far as I sat an officer down and counseled them on, respect to people when you talk to them. It could go further, a written memo if this is a pattern for somebody. If I brought Jim Slayton in one day and I did a counseling memo with him and I talked to him and he said he understood, he was having a bad day or whatever, and then I don't hear from Jim Slayton again, we're good, he got it. But if I constantly have Jim Slayton come in for something, there's a progression. It starts with, the verbal, then a written, and then it could go to the discipline goes up higher. So don't ever feel like you can't call and say, hey, I was dissatisfied with the way the officer treated me or one of my clients on a call.
I do think this is a critical part of the discussion. I think when it comes down to it, this is a lot of what we're dealing with right now, why we're here having this conversation, right? So it's a constant tension. I think you guys both acknowledge that in your even sensitivity toward the officers and addressing the issue, right? Understanding that they're, nobody wants to be them. They're dealing with the worst of the worst continually, right? And the challenges associated with that. But at the same time, if we deal with everything on a policy and procedure level, like we're talking about with the executive order, but at the ground level, right, with the face-to-face interactions, there's not a mutual respect on some level, right? If people like yourselves feel devalued, how are others feeling devalued who are the ones they're navigating the confrontation with, right? So and I don't have I'm not saying I have an easy answer for this, but this is the tension that I think we're here for. Like this is why we're in the dilemma we're in. So I think it's an important part of the discussion, and I think it's really kind of where we need to focus our energy, at least in our community. And going back to Lieutenant Slayton with what you're saying, the challenge is, you having those procedures in place, but what Stephanie was saying is the buy-in, right? So it's one thing to get them to go through the ropes of the disciplinary process. It's another thing to have the buy-in, that because respect is communicated and value is communicated in how we communicate, not necessarily the words we say or what we don't say, right? It's the looks, it's the attitude. And so and I don't know how you train respect into people in an academy, or train value into people in the ranks. I'm not sure how that happens, but police officers don't want to be customer service representatives, but in many ways that's what we're talking about.
In the conversations I always had as an officer to another officer, or as a lieutenant to somebody that I'm supervising, is I treat people the way I want to be treated. And that's what you have to do. And you can't be with them on every call, but you just, it's a constant reminder. Hey, just treat somebody with respect and you'll get it back. It doesn't matter if I arrested somebody. If I arrested them and I treat them with respect, sometimes they're thanking me before they walk out the door. And that's the tough part to get somebody to understand, is you're taught in the academy one thing, you have to be this stern face, you make the arrest, you're a robot, but then yet you have to be human in the same aspect. And that's all people really want, is to be treated with respect.
Yeah. And it's a protective mechanism too, right? I mean, you're dealing with people on an ongoing basis that are, if you put your heart out for every person you're dealing with, you're going to be ripped up as an officer, but that tension of being able to still value them and at least show a level of respect to them, even though every appearance may be that they don't deserve respect in that moment, you still put it out there. But that's a tough thing to instill into people.
Jim, is training, our trainings like implicit bias training, and just say trainings that your typical white male may not be interested in going to, or adverse to attending on their own. Is that sort of thing incentivized in any way? I like that you're there for the rank and file to offer that. But is there a carrot that goes with that departmentally?
Now, in 2016, Chief Butler and Deputy Chief Anthony had us all do implicit bias training, and it was a mandatory training that we had to go to. And there are certain things, that's one of the first questions as people ask, are you going to pay me to go to this? And that's what it boils down to, instead of, geez, I'd like to go to this training. Some of them are like that. The implicit bias is, we're looking to another one right now to have the whole department trained again in implicit bias. And it'll be something that we'll mandate, and we'll end up paying for the officers to go. Some will volunteer, and others you're going to have to force to go.
What's the follow-up to that kind of training? What do you know, is there any conversations, any breakout groups, or, I'm just curious to see. I mean, we've all sat through trainings, and it's really hard to generalize and, keep some of that training top of mind until you're in a situation. But the transfer knowledge, I'm just wondering how it's enhanced. What do you offer anything?
Sorry about that. Yeah, we'll follow up. We'll do in our lineups where we'll do single video courses. We'll discuss different things that we've been to. Now, a lot of times what we'll do is, if we send someone officer to a training, like I went to de-escalation training for a week, so I'm a certified instructor. So we'll make that person come back and teach others and do courses in-house. So some of that training, we make them come back and teach other officers. So they got it and they're paying attention. They do a lesson plan, and then they'll follow up with other members. But we always try to follow up with some type of topic amongst the shifts.
How about, is there any positive reinforcement for officers that are exemplary in their behaviors with the public, especially when they're in challenging situations? I'm just curious in either department.
So the kind of to piggyback off Sheriff's Office, we have our wide range of trainings. Some of them are video trainings, some of them are in-person trainings. And then our sergeants are tasked with having a real handle on the folks that they're assigned to, 4 or 5 different members assigned to each shift or each sergeant, and they're tasked with, feedback, with interaction, with observing them as they interact with the public in various situations. And so our agency really relies on that supervisor, that first line supervisor, to police ourselves, if you will. And our supervisors are selected carefully and met with regularly. As far as interactions, this year has been a bad year for interactions in courses, but in previous courses, some that I've taken, they have been breakout sessions and things of that nature, as well as lecture. As far as interactions with the public, Sheriff reaches out regularly to our supervisors to say, hey, let me know if someone's doing a good job, not just if they're doing a bad job. And so that passes back up through, and I know, because that passes my desk, that we do reach out to members. Maybe it's just an email, maybe it's passing in the hall, maybe it's something that requires or is warranted a little bit more of a acknowledgement when they are doing a good job. They deal with a difficult situation, they handle a difficult individual really well, and then we get feedback from the public, and that also gets passed on up through to the sheriff, back to the officer if we get feedback, both positive and negative. And we do get some of both. I'm happy to say recently it's been more of the positive, but we try and keep our supervisors on the front lines having a real pulse of what our officers are doing, how they're interacting, if they're stressed, if they're not stressed, and try and really manage some of those situations like I've heard discussed here.
How often do you guys get complaints regarding interactions with officers? How often do you see concerns come your way regarding interactions with the public?
Well, I've been doing this since 2007 in this role. And so I'm 14 years in, and I would say if I get 12 in a year average, that's probably a lot. I don't get that many. I'll be perfectly honest with you. If I get probably less than 12 in a year, a truly negative complaint, you know, attitude or approach or things like that, like we've talked about. So it quite frankly, it's not that often. And, you know, of those 12, there's rarely something that rises to a significant level.
If you're only getting 12, that would be a sign to me that, because I think no matter how good your organization is and how fair your organization is, if it's easy to complain, or if you're really making feedback, you know, an important part of what you're doing, then you should get more than 12. Like maybe it's hard for the public to access, you know, the agency when they have a complaint. I don't know. 12 seems really low for complaints about your agency to me.
Yeah, we've you know, we've recently updated some of our social access, meaning complaints on the websites and things of that nature, but we've had tip lines, anonymous complaint lines through websites and phone calls. And of course the sheriff, everybody, you know, everybody that I shouldn't say everybody, but the sheriff is a very public figure. So whenever somebody does something wrong, the sheriff seems to find out about it, you know. So I don't think it's that difficult, but we've made it even easier in the last couple of years for folks to find us online, social media, website, and to file comments via those sources. So, you know, 12 is a guesstimate based on the fact that I don't oftentimes see one every month. But I think I will say it'll be interesting to read down through and see some of the survey results, which was a little bit last minute, but you know, that's been promoted through the media, through the website, social media, things like that. So, you know, that's another way we can kind of look and see at a snapshot in time what our community is thinking and how they perceive us.
And we don't, we're like Lieutenant Wellauer said, we don't get that many. And when we do, it's a lot of it is a phone call to the desk stating something they didn't like. And when the officer or the sergeant at the desk explains to them, they seem pretty satisfied. It's more of a, I want to be heard type thing than I want to come in and file a formal complaint. Because if it gets to that level, we invite them in. If it's something that we can't resolve on the phone and say, hey, this is why this is why 3 cars stopped by in the middle of the night when you were stopped. You know, it's about the time of day. It's about the number of people in the car. And then they're like, okay. But if it gets to the point where they really want to make an official complaint, we invite them in, or we'll go to their house and say, okay, you know, we can do a one-on-one interview with it. But there are very few.
So yeah, that's what I think I'm talking about more, is like the calls into the desk. And what you're saying is you address them, you head them off by explaining things, and that makes sense to me.
But even, I would say, even on this call, so we've heard specific situations involving Stephanie, involving Laurie, that, you know, didn't rise to a level to make that call. And if there were avenues to sort of, you know, do a quick, if folks were interested, if folks knew that you were interested in getting constant feedback in that way, I guess providing a very simple avenue, anonymous avenue to get that feedback would be really important. I too am surprised at only 12, you know, complaints. You know, maybe that is that people are afraid to make them, they're afraid of retaliation, they're, you know, so I think that's something to think more about as maybe born out of this process. Because, you know, Stephanie, I think that, and Laurie, those examples that you gave us, I think they're, you know, and it may not have risen to the level to call. So, but it is an issue that needs to be handled. So
I've called.
you have called, okay.
But I believe strongly in what you're saying, that some people may be intimidated, fearful of repercussions. And then there's other people that just don't feel comfortable voicing their concerns or even know how to do that. So, you know, that's an issue as well. But I mean, my calls have been to like the chief at the time, you know, so it was addressed and then I assume probably, you know, if it rises to a certain level, Stephanie will voice her concern as well, and probably anybody else. But as a private citizen, I'm not calling. You know, like I'm calling on behalf of work.
And there is a chain of command, which we like to, and I've heard the chief say that you need he'll give the officer's name or the sergeant's name or lieutenant's name of that shift and say, call them, because they need to know. If you call the police chief, you know, does it get back to that particular officer? Does it get back to where if you're calling that officer's command officer at the time, he's going to have the conversation. So they're going to know there was a complaint. So that's why we always try to throw it back to the shift so the individuals involved know.
Laurie, were you speaking, Laurie? You appear to be frozen, but
Locked up.
No, underneath my internet connection unstable, y'all froze. So
okay.
if you saw my lips moving, it was talking to myself.
To us, it just looked like you went to sleep.
Yes.
You were just sleeping.
Okay, so, you know, great conversations born out of collaboration is kind of the topic we were kind of following, but we had some good conversations about this. And this is precisely, and as Josh mentioned, precisely the kind of conversations that we would want to have born out of this whole engagement series. Nate, what do you think about getting on to the next topics for crime prevention?
Well, I think maybe we should put a pin on it seems like a pretty good place to stop. What I might suggest is if we can, as a group, just go through the bulleted items and just write down, you know, some quick thoughts that you might have and disseminate that before our next meeting, so that if there are issues that you want people thinking about before our next meeting, please share that with the group. I believe we're scheduled for December 8th at 3 o'clock, although I don't know if the invite has gone out yet. But you know, we wanted to tackle the entire thing. Doesn't look like we got to the second half of it, but and for my money, this is a very productive 2 hours. And thanks everybody for getting over the technical difficulties. Hopefully next time we'll be able to have a full session. But again, I think this is really, really productive. And I know, Aileen, you have a hard out at 5 o'clock, correct?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Ready for the
So
next.
we're pretty close to 5. So if anybody else has any other thing they want to add, please feel free. But my suggestion is just look at the second half of the bulleted points and let's get an email chain going so that we can do a little homework before our next meeting.
Yeah, I apologize for the earlier confusion with the Zoom. We'll get that straightened around. Josh, thank you very much for picking up my slack.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. Good Thanksgiving to everybody.
You
You're
too.
welcome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Josh,
Yes.
if you would just download that recording and send it to me.
Yeah,
Can you
I
put it in a
just